Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, friends. Ryan here with another cynical My Top 5. Today, at the end of the proverbial gun barrel, are ant modelers. New, old, technologically ancient, and all these things are aspects of the ant modeling world that I've seen repeated time and time again throughout the admittedly relatively small sample size of ant modelers that I've reviewed or am in the process of reviewing, whether it be software or hardware based. I generally don't like to create these negatively themed videos, but I do feel like this is going to serve some productive purpose in two ways. One, it will keep me from going off on tangents on future videos because this will apply to some of the stuff that's coming up that I don't think is really relevant to the review, but I think should be said. And number two, I am curious to hear if you guys think this same way and if you are as scrutinous about some of these products as I am, or at the very least, you're tired of hearing the same old marketing stuff over and over. Before we get into it, though, I would like to acknowledge a post I made within the past week or so, or whenever it was, because I am in the middle of tracking my next album, specifically the next EP. And I want to go kind of legit with this. Obviously, this isn't going to have some mega budget behind it, but I would like to have some legitimate artwork behind it. And I'm asking you guys first, the community, if you have any artwork experience or you know people that might be interested, please leave them at the email in the description and probably in a pinned comment down below because I want to get this ball rolling and I've got the music underway and I think there's enough there conceptually to get started on this. So the sooner the better. And ultimately, I think it'd be awesome if one or more of you guys could be involved in this experience since you've allowed so much of this channel to happen through your viewership and support. And I'd love to give a opportunity for work and exposure going forward for anyone that would be interested. So with that said, on to my top 5 annoyances, bitches and moans surrounding ant modeling. It should be said, if it's not obvious enough, I am the biggest fan in the world when it comes to digital ant modeling. I think it's the future. In some ways, I feel that it's not taken far enough. There are certain companies out there that try to push the threshold and create idealized ant models or build things from the ground up that you physically cannot do with real circuits. And that's what I would like to see more of rather than copying the same existing ones over and over again. But I also think there's a really great value to be had in any kind of ant modeling software or hardware to replicate those kind of tones. So, you know, through the dozens and dozens of videos I've made on this channel, hopefully it's obvious that I am a huge proponent of these things. But no product nor even product category is ever perfect, and these guys are not excluded from that. So in no particular order then. Number 5, Gimmick presets. You guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this. And admittedly, it has gotten better, in my opinion, at least in the newer products I've tried over the years, where whether it be a Neural DSP plugin or like a fractal ant modeler, the stuff that is in the box is just usable. It may not be exactly what you want, it may not be the tone you're chasing for, but what I want out of presets 9 times out of 10, if not 99 times out of 100, is just a usable, dry sound with a option for reverb and delay and drive on top of it. That's what I really like a lot of the bass presets that come in like a fractal unit or even a lot of the modern Line 6 stuff. It's like, here's a diesel rig, here's a Mesa rectifier rig, here is a Fender Deluxe rig, and they've got some effects that kind of fit that stuff, and I think that's great. But there was kind of a dark age in, I would say, the early to late 2000s, and I would even say some of the predecessors of the original pod that just piles crap on top of crap to show off what those units could do. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for customer choice. I'm not saying get rid of those wacky presets entirely. Me personally, I'm not huge on, synth sounds out of a guitar. I'm not asking you to get rid of all of those synth presets that might come in a contemporary ant modeler. What I am asking, if you're going to put 50 of those, put 50 or more regular type of presets that most people would be making guitar-based music with as well. Now, there are potentially other extremes where you have stuff like the Neural DSP plugins where a lot of the presets that are included sound a little too samey, and they're going to do that when you're modeling a specific amplifier rig or you have an archetype that is only based around 3 amp channels and a couple effects. So obviously there's only so much you can do with that. But I would prefer this approach where they're all just a little different, especially when you're derivating on one sound, compared to here's 120 presets of barely usable garbage and 8 that are, oh, it's like regular guitar tones. In my opinion, this was a symptom of trying to mask how limited the amplifier and drive tones were of a lot of these early and I would say last generation, if you will, amp modelers. Whereas now, even budget-conscious units create such great dry tones, and even better when you stack some light reverb or ping pong delay on top of it, that it's just not necessary to cover that in a blanket of modulation and phaser and weird wobbly stuff that is just not usable for most people. So I'm glad it's improving, but going back and looking at older products, gimmicky presets are among my biggest annoyances. Some of my criticisms, however, are a little less tangible than the previous example and actually don't have a lot to do with the product itself and more to do with the way that it was marketed and promoted. And this is exemplified in number 4, marketing tech specs that no one cares about, or at least no one should care about. And for this one, I'm going to pick on 2 of my favorite players in the game, Fractal Audio and Neural DSP. Now, when it comes to information, the more the better. You know, an informed consumer is the best kind of consumer. I always think it's a good idea and it's best practice for a manufacturer, especially of any kind of technical product like this, to make publicly available whatever microprocessor they're using, or where they're sourcing their PCBs, or where they're sourcing their memory, where they're getting their screens, and who's making the chassis. Obviously, some of that stuff's going to be trade secret, but the more the better, because that will allow us to make an informed decision. If especially you pay attention to the tech space, you might know that, oh, this batch of memory that came from HK Hynix at this point, or from Samsung, was faulty, and maybe we should raise a red flag over that, or be wary when buying this product. Where these companies tend to get carried away is when they use these tech specs as the center point, or at least a large chunk of their marketing materials, because ultimately it's not about the tech when it comes to these kind of devices. Can it make a pleasant guitar sound? Can it replicate within a certain margin of accuracy the sound of a tube amplifier? That's what we want to gauge this on. And then there's these auxiliary things like how many times can you do that in one instance? Can you have 2 amp blocks? Can you have multiple inputs and outputs? Can you make parallel signal paths? That sort of thing. What's the connectivity? And those are deliverables. Those are measurable benefits that actually set products apart, or that would significantly change the user experience from one product to another, whether we're talking about the competition or just the previous generation. These are things that can be demonstrated, that a guitarist like myself could see and go, oh wow, that has 2 times the amp channels at the same time, that has 2 times the delay blocks and 2 times the drive blocks. Wow, like that's going to really help my workflow. Or it halves the audio dropout when you change a preset, whatever. Those are things that actually matter, that we can measure when we're playing guitar. What we can't measure? What we can't see the benefit of? A clock increase on a microprocessor, or the amount of cores that that processor has. Unlike the world of enthusiast computing, where you can create tens if not hundreds of thousands of hardware permutations and run the same software on it to gauge the performance of that hardware, you can't do that with amp modeling hardware. It's not like you can load up Helix Native on an Axe-FX 3 and see how it runs compared to a Helix rack. Then maybe you could say something about the hardware. But when Neural DSP comes out here and says, oh, we have 4 cores that run in parallel to create the equivalent of 2 gigahertz, what does that mean to anybody? Now, to me, that sounds puny, that sounds pathetic, because I'm running a 6-core processor, 5 gigahertz, and that thing's like 3 years old now. So that doesn't impress anybody that does keep up with the tech space. And for most of you guitar players out there, you have no idea what that means, nor should you. It doesn't matter. It does not affect the end product in any measurable way. So why are we talking about it? Quit spending all this time and effort to make it sound like you have this beast supercomputer, when in reality, it does not matter in the least. Can you deliver those measurable results? Can it be under a certain amount of input latency? Does it sound good? And, well, past the year 2020, pretty much all of this stuff sounds pretty damn good. So quit fluffing your marketing materials with these nonsense metrics. Quit comparing the raw performance of your newest rack unit to the last generation one when that doesn't translate at all to sound quality or usability, and just give us a good product and it will speak for itself. Learn how to do good demos, which, you know, all these companies I'm talking about do great demonstrations of their product. So it's not necessary. Give us the raw information, that's great. Just don't rely on that as the backbone of what you're trying to sell. The next trend is something that you could very well count on, well, maybe two hands, maybe three or more, depending on the company in question, something I would call amp model bias. What do I mean by that? Well, in the good old days with something like the original Line 6 pod, to cover the entire, shall we say, distortion spectrum, to get from silky clean, no breakup to something like a Soldano amplifier, and you had to fit it all in 16 amp models or less, you got a pretty decent variety for what you had. You know, this ranges from a Tweed Fender amplifier, you got a Vox, you've got kind of the three staples of Marshall, the JTM 45, a Plexi, and a JCM 800 sound. You got a rectifier tone, you got a Soldano tone, you got kind of a big buff style fuzz box thing. And for the time, that's a pretty decent selection of amplifiers. Obviously, it's missing a lot of core tones that I like in amp modelers, but again, you can't knock it too much for the pre-2000 era. Fast forward to today though, and you see a lot of companies, Line 6 included, that get laser focused on one corner, one palette of guitar amplifier sounds. And if I had to guess, it's because of either A, ease of modeling, or B, just the sheer availability of the amplifiers that they are attempting to model. You know, it's a lot easier to get your hands on you know, a stock Marshall amp than it is to get your hands on a $5,000 diesel VH4. So I understand that. However, I think if you're going to make an amp modeler for everyone, for all guitarists, you have to consider all guitarists' needs. And I think the profiling move made by Kemper over 10 years ago and now Neural DSP with their quad core capture is absolutely genius because they, you know, kind of outsource that work to the community. Fractal Audio just models too many amplifiers to ever really gel with. You know, we're talking 200 plus in one box. So you kind of get a pretty decent sampling of everything. But with like Line 6 and even some of the more budget brands, which I have a little more leniency with, they tend to get bogged down and hyper-focused on this good old days type mentality and put out a dozen plus Marshall Plexi and JCM 800 derivatives and then ignore like everything else, which I don't have a problem with getting in the nitty-gritty details of these amp models. Like I said, Fractal Audio has like, what, 240-ish amp models now, and a big surplus of those are all Marshall derivatives, whether it be actual Marshalls themselves or like Plexi mods or Splons or Friedmans or Camerons or whatever you might come across in that hardware. And there's an argument to be made that a lot of those are redundant, but they are a little different. And so if you want to go the whole 9 yards, I'm not opposed to it. Just don't ignore everything else too. And Fractal does a really good job of that. They ignore solid state amplifiers that I'm not a big fan of, but that's a discussion for another day. But when it comes to stuff like Line 6 and some of the other budget brands that I'm, again, admittedly a little more lenient on, I don't find it acceptable to have all these Park amplifiers, 3 or 4 Plexi models, 3 or 4 JTM 45 models, a handful of JCM 800 models, and then only have like 3 or 4 truly high gain amps or 3 or 4 truly boutique clean to breakup amps. It's like you're missing your whole audience here. Again, if you want to advertise your product as like this is the be all end all classic rock blues modeler, then that's totally cool. Then stick to that. But if you're trying to reach all the guitar players out there, then you need to cover those high gain tones. You need to cover those clean tones. You need to cover everything, you know. If I were to start up an amp modeling software company or hardware company for that matter, the last thing I would do would say, hey guys, here's a clean Fender amp, here's a Marshall style amp, here's a dual rectifier, done. You know, that's not what you lead into because everyone has done it. You know, that's kind of the status quo. That is the bare minimum nowadays. You want to impress me, you want to get my eyes on your product, do what Neural DSP did. Oh, here's the Fortin Meshuggah, here's the NTS, here's the Omega Ampworks, now here's the Soldano, which this one is the least impressive of the bunch so far to me in terms of the unique factor, that's what you should be going after, not recycling these same tones, these same amplifiers everyone else has. And some of these amp models that I consider must-haves aren't even ones that I particularly get along with all that much or that I would use more than a few times. But that is what makes amp modelers worth the value to me, is that a lot of these amps like Dumbles or their derivatives or diesels or what have you, or stuff that I would never buy in real life because of their cost. But if I can get the sound on a digital platform, then that's a great way to experience that sound. On to number two, the great UI wars, or perhaps the race to the bottom when it comes to user interfaces. Industrial design goes in phases, it goes in patterns, everyone borrows from one another, that's no secret, and that's no crime by any means. But there have certainly been eras of amp modelers, and I think there are some unfortunate trends to follow all those things. It's easy to say that we are in a post-Helix world where everything ranging from Moore to Hotone, or Hotone, however you actually say that, to the Neural DSP Quad Cortex, all kind of share that similar, blank, minimalist, very few colors, black background kind of art style and user interface, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the minimalist style is something I certainly prefer to the visual vomit of a lot of the mid-2000s software, and even ranging back into the early 90s to mid 2000s, you can see a lot of products that copied off of Line 6 and some of the bigger competition out there. So it's nothing new, again, but what I don't like is when this kind of mentality strips away all of the magic that amp modeling can offer. A lot of the times these companies go for, again, racing to the bottom, and I'm all for simplicity when it comes to using something, but not at the cost of functionality. Now, not everyone out there needs to go through every page on an AxFX3. It's just not necessary. A lot of stuff just sounds great out of the box. If you don't need that, then there's plenty of products out there. But I feel there's a lot of amazing technology and a lot of things that could be user controllable that's just hidden because it's going to scare off the older players or people that just don't like to sit and tweak. And that's a phenomenon I have simply never understood. I don't get the rationale behind that, because if there's something I don't understand what it does, I just don't touch it. If it's working, leave it alone. Whether it be the miniature surface-mounted devices on a PCB, or the truss rod on a guitar, or hell, I can pull up a piece of software I use daily that overclocks my GPU. I don't know off the top of my head what the safe limits is for overclocking the memory on my GTX 1080 Ti. So you know what I do? I just don't touch it. It continues to work. Amazing. So I don't like this whole, we've got to dumb down all these products to the bare minimum requirements just so it makes those happy that would otherwise be afraid of what a speaker compression control could do or what a tone stack shift can do. And I think that's what's holding a lot of this product innovation back. And it's one of the reasons, again, that I absolutely love the AxFX platform, because you can just slap on blocks willy-nilly and you're going to get a good tone. Tube screamer in front of a 5150, in front of a 4x12 cab IR, it's going to work. But if you want to really nerd out and change the impedance or change the the grid bias or all these things that, again, I can't even think of off the top of my head, then you can do that too. And I would be willing to bet dollars to donuts. So there is some dev kit, some debug version of the Helix or Quad Cortex software that has these kind of controls, even if they're not exactly that, built in. And it's really sad to me that they don't trust the consumers with any of this stuff. Again, if you don't want to have that, then hide it. I'm totally cool with that kind of simplified mode too. But I would love to go in the guts of some of these amp models and play with the stuff that they no doubt tweak by ear to be able to make whole new sounds that simply don't exist. And I think it's kind of sad and disappointing, but honestly it speaks of the current state of affairs that a lot of these companies are either too afraid to do that, or they don't trust their consumers, or they just think we're that stupid. I'm not quite sure which it is. And a lot of this stuff obviously isn't going to play nicely within the entire range they have, but I again feel like it cannot just be Cliff Chase out there who is this maniacal genius who makes 10 firmware updates a week. there are other people out there that do good work in this industry, and I just would like to see that level of detail and that level of tweakability applied to other products out there, because that would introduce some much needed competition, in my opinion. Speaking of firmware updates, I will leave you off with my number one biggest pet peeve when it comes to AMP modeling, quite frankly, technology in general: paradoxical supremacy. This notion that it's always the best it's ever been, it's the best it's ever going to be, until next time, until it's not, because we're selling you the perfect product. Guys, this thing, this time, it sounds freaking incredible. It sounds just like the real thing. I'm telling you, you cannot even tell the difference when you blindfold test this amplifier model compared to the real thing. You can't tell until we come out with version 1.1. Then for realsies, this time, guys, this one is it. This one, you thought 1.0 was good. You're crazy. Until 1.15 comes out, when we add one more little tweak that okay, this for real this time though, this is the one. If you don't pay all that close attention to the AMP modeling space, this might be something you don't even think about. Obviously, continuous improvement is going to happen, and it is a good thing. But when product launch after product launch, year after year, YouTube review after YouTube review, you hear the same spiel that, oh guys, this time is the one. You could throw away all your other stuff. This is the best of the best until the next one comes out, because then that one is going to be the real deal. It's like, wait, hang on. Wasn't that last one like indistinguishable from the real one? So why should I buy this or upgrade? My biggest concern isn't the continuous improvement. It's the fact that no one is willing to admit that their product has room for continuous improvement. There always is, and that's not a bad thing. But I can't take a company seriously when 3 years ago they said this is it. Like, you'll never have to buy another amplifier again. You just, profile it and it sounds just like the real thing. And then someone in a forum or in an objective test says, no, that's not correct. Like, it doesn't do this response. It's still really great. It's 99% there, but this opportunity for improvement, and they get shot down immediately because, oh, you're just trolling, or you have no idea what you're talking about. You set this up wrong. No, there are always things that are not going to be perfect. Hopefully, until there is a time that it is perfected. So we need to be conscious of that. And I would appreciate if these companies would just say, hey, this is how good it is. Take that for what it is, and we will continue to make it better. That's the product I will buy, not I'll throw away all your other stuff, or you're an idiot for thinking your Gen 2 product sounds good. Now it sounds great. It's like, well, you're the one that sold me the Gen 2 product to begin with. You're the one that said it was identical to the real source to begin with. So now I can't trust anything you say. Ultimately, whether it be this last annoyance or the 4 that preceded it, what I'm asking for, and these are lofty goals here, is A, AMP modeling companies, whether it be the hardware side or the software side, and really tech companies in general, just be a little more transparent, a little more down to earth, and trust their consumers, that we're not complete dumbasses. And B, for consumers to be a little more critical of the stuff that they buy, to not take everything just face value. I'm not saying, Neural DSP or Kemper or Line 6 or Fractal or Moore or what have you are, money-grubbing corporations that are, we're going to trick you out of $1,500. No, that's not what's happening. There is passion behind every one of these products. You can absolutely tell that. What I am saying is, if you want to see this stuff go in a particular direction, then you kind of have to vote with your wallet. You have to ask yourself, is this solving a problem that I have currently? Is this going to make my life easier? Is it going to complement my sound or make me more creative? If yes, then, again, vote with your wallet. But if not, I don't think it's good practice to just throw your money at anything just because, screw it, why not? I think that's what's led to a lot of bloat in the tech space in general, and in every category, not just technology. And at the end of the day, again, this is all fun stuff for guitar, but hopefully you see the bigger picture here, and you can maybe apply this to other aspects of life that I think are a little more critical than whether or not a Soldano plugin sounds just like the real amplifier. So with that, thank you so very much for listening as always, and leave any questions, comments down below. We've got a hell of a lot of stuff coming up that I don't have enough time for, but hopefully we'll have fun along the way. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.